And of course, our host, D. Ray, he stepped aside to let me take over tonight. I have some lovely, lovely guests with me, these beautiful queens. They are going to introduce themselves, and then we're going to start on our topic of domestic violence.
Hi, I am Detective Maria Guerra. I actually go by my middle name, which is Sophie, but I've been in law enforcement for 18 years, 10 of those years on patrol, and 6 of those years in dispatch. And then I took a little time off, but I'm now at the Sheriff's Office at Fort Bend County, and I'm in the Family Violence Unit, and I love what I do.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Bankett. I work with the Empowered Survivor, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer. Been there for 4 years. We work with domestic violence victims.
And I'm Elizabeth Jackson Harris. I am from Los Angeles, California. I have a domestic shelter called Broken Vessels here in Houston, as well as a facility for seniors, a personal care home facility for seniors. And my background is in psychology, and I'm happy to be here.
Good evening. I am Monica Riley. I serve at the pleasure of City Council in Missouri City. I am a 3-4-time survivor that is thriving in life, and I go around speaking and sharing my story, my testimony of how I was able to escape domestic violence situations while trying to inspire and encourage other women to do so and to teach them how to thrive after complicated, difficult, horrible situations. So I'm happy to be here with the perfect blend and all these beautiful women.
And of course, I'm your host for this evening. My name is Tiki. I am a loan officer from Detroit, Michigan. I am a 2-time survivor, and I just wanted these ladies to be present here so that if we can help others, definitely. And I am actually still going through what happened to me, so hopefully they can give me little tidbits that will actually help me in my situation as well. All right, so we're going to start off talking about domestic violence and what causes it. So first of all, there's different types of domestic violence. There's sexual, physical, verbal, emotional, financial, family violence, and dating. So I want to ask the sheriff, which one is more prevalent out there?
So actually, we have more the common marriage, family violence, which is between spouses, which would be husband and wife, those kind of relationships, and also violence between siblings. You know, we see a lot of that too, and a lot of people do not understand that, including violence between siblings is also an issue as well.
Now, Sheriff Fagan was here with us last week, and he said that house calls to domestic violence are probably the worst ones. Do you know why he would have said that?
Yes, actually, for our patrol units, it is more dangerous because a lot of times we see weapons involved, unfortunately. That being knives, guns, or some of the things that we do see. They go hand in hand with some of the reports that we deal with.
All right. So, Miss Monica, I know a little bit of your story and some of the things that happened. You want to touch a little bit on your story and how you were able to get out of it?
Well, the first key to escaping and exiting a domestic violence situation is first you have to want to get out. And you see a need to be absent from that situation. For me, I had multiple situations with that, and because each one of them ended very horrific, it was an automatic understanding for me that if I wanted to live past this moment, I was going to have to make a really tough decision and escape. And so one of those situations, I had been basically kidnapped by my boyfriend at the time. This was years ago, and because he had been drinking, his friends had been drinking, and he was someone that I truly cared about. I never thought he would bring me any harm. But unfortunately, through his behavior, from that influence, he felt that it would be okay to take me to a secluded place where I had some other friends waiting, and they were going to gang rape me. And once I realized that, I asked to get out of the vehicle. I was not allowed to get out. And eventually it turned into a physical struggle, and where I was being beaten in the back of a car. And I was about 110 pounds, 5'2", and he weighed about 270, and was about 6'3" at the time. And so for me, it was survival mode. It was like I knew that I was going to be either gang raped or killed or both. And for me, I had to make a very harsh, scary decision. We were traveling down a very busy highway, and in the midst of me kicking him in his face, I unlocked the door and pulled the doorknob, and I used his body to kick myself out backwards, and I landed into oncoming traffic. And I had to make a split-second move to jump up and run. I ran as fast as I could, as hard as I could. I locked myself into the Jack in the Box bathroom, and when I stayed there for about an hour, and when I did exit, I thought it was safe. I had determined I'm going to leave, get out of this. And as I was leaving, I was walking home. I was probably about 3 miles away from my apartment. I was walking home, and the car pulled up, grabbed me, snatched me in a crowd full of people. And at that point, I'm now being abducted and being beaten again by the same individual. And so as a result of all the witnesses that saw me being abducted, they called into the police department, gave the license plate number, and by the time they had taken me to the location, I jumped out running again. And 5 minutes afterwards, I was able to get to my apartment, call the police, and they said they already had the man in custody because of the reports of people calling of my abduction.
So they had seen what was actually going on?
They seen him jump out because there was a driver, and then it was my boyfriend. And he jumped out, saw me, and grabbed me and threw me in my head, hit the inside of the car, and I was a little disoriented at that point. And because it happened in front of about 20 witnesses, everybody was running to the car to try to save me, but they had sped off and sped on the traffic and left, but they all called in to 911, reported the vehicle, the make, the model, what the two abductors looked like. So by the time I was able to escape again, they already actually had them in custody. So where I jumped out and ran, because they were trying to, park and get me out, I broke loose and I took off running. And I told them I'm calling the police, I'm running, so I'm calling the police. And when they left, they got pulled over like 2 minutes after I had left, and they were surrounded, guns blazing. So they arrested them on the spot, including the gentleman who was just the driver.
So I do have to ask, with me being a victim and Liz and also Monica, there's always red flags, of course. So with your incident that happened, you did share some of the incident about what happened before all that began. What makes it, or what, it's just that split second in our mind where we know, I have to leave now.
Yes.
So I guess the question I'm trying to ask is, we see the red flags before, but why does it take almost danger or us losing our lives before we leave?
I think because we as women, we're very emotional, and so we immediately get emotionally attached to someone that we really like, and we start to love them way too fast and too hard, because that old saying, love is blind, that could have some merit to it, because when you love someone so much, and when it's good, it's great, but when it's bad, it's really bad. And so For that particular situation, there were red flags. You know, he would grab me very harshly at times, and the intimacy was rough sometimes, which I thought was strange. And then there was also the vulgar language and things. So for me, there were signs, but I will tell you the key for me now, that it wasn't back then, is education. I didn't know that that wasn't okay. Because I was a young person, and just because he pampered me, he bought me things, and he was so cool and fun. I got to get into the club for free. Your priorities are mixed up sometimes, but I think it's important for you to talk to people, to tell them what those red flags are, and the importance of women not investing their heart into an individual until you've done your complete research and paid attention to all of the standards that you've already set, so that if something is not right, you know how to exit and when to exit, and you're confident and brave enough to exit. It's never a reason to stay, because in that situation, I had to leave. I wound up being like semi-homeless because I was living with him. And so for me, I felt I'd rather be homeless and alive than be in shelter and beaten or possibly dead, and my family doesn't even know where I'm at.
Okay, and what about you, Liz? Okay, so I was asking, because there's always red flags. So why do we always wait until it's almost near death before we decide to leave?
Well, I think each situation is different. With me, I've never experienced a man putting his hands on me. I never experienced someone just saying that I love you to death. And I honestly thought at that time when he was speaking those words, I thought they were kind of cute. I thought it was sweet, right? And so it was the fact, oh, he loves me so much, that the little push and the shoves, they didn't appear to be threatening because we were in love, and he was my husband. And so from the push and the shoves, and then there's starting to be a little bit more physical, fear took place because his actions were lining up with his words. And when he said that I will love you to death, you have to sometimes believe that, especially if it's something you've never experienced, if it's something that you wasn't really familiar with. So with me, I experienced a lot of tugging, pulling, hurting, slapping, dragging, and fears that I was crippled. But I think what happens is that for me, you become paralyzed and you become so fearful of the threats that are being thrust at you, and you have children, and then your children are now involved by saying, I will kill your kids, right? So when you hear those things, you believe those things. And now what had me to remove myself from that is when it got to a point where he poured gasoline over my head. And he had a lighter in his hand, and he said, if you speak a word, if you say anything remotely to what I don't like, I am going to set you afire. So at this point, I was so broken, I was so low, I was so hurt. I felt hopeless. I didn't care. I didn't care. So what I did was I just called out on God. I didn't think about what could possibly take place. I was tired. I was worn out. And I felt death was better than what was happening because my pride set in. I'm going to church, have a beautiful life, beautiful home. People are looking at me as if I had it all together. There's no way that my pride was going to let me go out and say anything. But I had to muster up my strength. And I had to come with a strategic plan, because you have to have a plan. You have to have a plan. You just can't stand up by the monster and say, I'm leaving, I don't care what you do to me, because what does that do? It fuels them more. So you have to be very strategic on your exit.
Now, Miss Sophie, get to you, Miss Stephanie.
Yes.
You said that your mom, she was involved for about 14 years. I know at some point you sat down and talked to her about it once you got a little older. How did she feel about going through that for 14 years?
So to touch on what these other two beautiful ladies said, and can I just say, y'all are survivors. Thank you for doing what you do, because y'all are here to pave the way for other ladies who are too scared to say something. But what I will touch on is my mom. I saw it from a child's eyes for a very long time, and it took my mom 14 years to finally say, I can do this on my own with 5 children. And it was, my dad, unfortunately, was so controlling of our family situation to where he would not allow my mom to even drive anywhere with a vehicle. And so the control of the mental capacity is just so great. You don't understand how much it can break one down. And as what you said earlier, you know, it's to the point to where they start to use the children against you. And for my mom's moment of her saying, how, you know, now is my time to leave and save myself and my children, is when my dad said, I have graves ready for y'all. I'm going to take my children and you will never find them. So at that moment, my mom said, I have to leave. I mean, even talking about it now, this is the first time I've publicly said anything about it, because it was, as I touched on before, about that embarrassment. You know, you don't want that shame in your family to know, but the manipulation was so real. When I realized at a young age that I had cousins, I didn't know I had family, because he alienated us from the rest of my family. And it was by chance that my uncle saw my brother playing down the street one day and said, that's my nephew, and came and literally scooped us out of the house while my dad was at work. So that was our moment.
And Stephanie, with you being in charge of, or you said you have a home for survivors?
No,
Or
I work with domestic violence victims.
victims?
Yes.
Okay. So out of all these that I named, with the financial, verbal, emotional, sexual, physical, family violence, and dating, what's more prevalent to where you are?
What we see, what is very prevalent, is your husband, wife, and we do see some men. We see a lot of women, but we do see some men that are abused. It's normally that partner. There are a lot of teens that we see, but we see a lot of partners, husbands and wives. So very few men, but husbands and wives. Yeah.
Okay, now, as far as the men being victims, have there been some proven and they've actually found the woman guilty of the abuse?
I don't know of any particular cases off the top of my head, but we have had several victims, men victims, that have come forward. There was a particular case that really sticks out in my head. There was a mother that called. She had 2 sons that both were being abused in different relationships. It was really, really sad, because you don't think these are well-known men. They very prominent, have great jobs, everything's going great. Like the young lady said before, everything looks like it should be great, but the women were abusive, and they were using the children as their weapon. You know, you won't see your kid, I'll take the kid away, I'll say that you hit me, I'll use all these different things against them. And the mother saw that and called us and said, my sons need help. She raised them to not hit women, to be respectful to women, and so that's what they did. But she wanted them to stand up for themselves, but she did not want them to be abusive. So she wanted to get them some help, and we did help them. But most of the time, it is women. It's women.
Now I have to ask Monica and Elizabeth, did you guys ever go to counseling to talk about this? Or was it just the grace of God that helped pull you through?
Well, I didn't know Jesus back then when my episodes were taking place. So I never actually went to counseling, and I will be honest with you, I never actually even talked about the multiple relationships of abuse. Never until literally, I'll probably say about maybe 4 years ago. I was talking to an associate, and just they were going through a domestic violence situation. I was sharing my story, and that was actually my first time even telling anyone I had ever been abused. And from that point, it kind of launched into, would you speak about your story? So I never actually told anybody. My children recently found out about 2 years ago about the different relationships when they heard me speaking at an event, and I forgot to tell them that that's what I was going to be speaking about. And they were, I'd always talked to them about domestic violence, the signs, the red flags, so that they could be prepared, but I actually forgot to share my story with them. So I think it's like now that I'm a strong Christian believer, I feel like God is always there with us all when we're going through very complicated, horrible, terrible things. And so whether you know Jesus or you don't know Jesus, it doesn't change how you think and your fear, your capacity to leave. Honestly, that doesn't really have anything to do with it at the moment, because you have Christian women like my sister here and you. We're all Christians, and we've gone through this, and even knowing that it's wrong, we still weren't able to leave. And it had nothing to do with our faith. It really has to do with you having to make a decision. Are you scared? Are you brave? Or what are you going to do? So I didn't get a chance to go through counseling. Honestly, it didn't really bother me when it happened, because once I survived it, that one and the next one and the next one, because keep in mind, I still didn't know that this was wrong. I grew up in a household where there's domestic violence, so for me, this was a norm. And so it was until I got into my 40s and 50s that I realized, oh, this is an issue, and it's because of all the awareness, all of the education, and the discussions that were going on is when I realized that this is a real thing. And I didn't have the scars that some people are left with, because by that time my faith in Jesus Christ was on a whole nother level, and any worries I had, I just kind of put them off to him. I do still have some physical or spiritual or whatever you want to call them, scars. You can't see them, most of them anymore, but the ones that I do have is certain movements towards me that I'm still working through, and that's also a process. So I hope that the experts will talk about how to overcome those non-physical scars of when someone raises their hand or, touches me around my neck or something like that. And those are the things that I can honestly say that I still, after so many years, I still work through. The trauma, yes.
And Liz?
I have to say that I had a strong faith and trust in God, right? I did not go immediately into counseling because, like Monica said, I felt like I was an overcomer, that I removed myself. I was able to be removed from that situation because I was actually rescued from someone. And I was so ashamed. I was just so excited and just so happy just to be out of that situation. It did not take place until years later, when you have these traumas and you're thinking that you have overcome, because we are overcomers, right? So you think that you have overcome, but then, as she was saying, you raise a hand, or someone walk up to you, or voices suddenly too loud.
Triggers.
Yeah, and those are your triggers. But till I got into a healthier relationship, and the person said, "Girl, you need some counseling." And I'm thinking, there's nothing wrong with me. But to know that there was a lot of things that needed to be fixed. So yes, there was counseling, but it wasn't right away. And I'm still in counseling today.
Well, you had mentioned when we did the program before that it took 15 years.
Yeah, 15 years for me to even speak on it. It took 15 years for me to even want to talk about it. Because if you don't look a certain way, you don't act a certain way, you don't look like you've come out of hell, right? And so you just want to leave that over there. But in order for you to really truly heal, and in order for you to really be able to step out of the shadows into the light that God has given you, you have to expose it, because the enemy cannot keep that. He cannot keep you in bondage. It's not allowed.
Well, I would definitely say I am a survivor, but I haven't completely overcame. So they did find my assailant, they found him guilty. However, he filed a civil suit against me. So I'm out of $25,000 because he decided to retaliate. I don't understand why it's okay for the law to say anyone can file a civil suit. And that's what every DA that I've spoken to has told me. Anybody can file a civil suit. When you're a victim, you should not be further victimized by something like that when you're going through that trauma. And that made it even worse, because I had to dip into my retirement to actually pay some attorneys to try to get rid of this civil suit before the felony case ever took place. And so that brings to me more anger because monetarily, I have to build it back up. So as law enforcement, I mean, are they even working on something like this for people to stop filing these civil suits against victims?
So as far as the civil suit goes, that's something that unfortunately I wouldn't have the direct answer for, because that's something that our district attorney's office would handle. So I know, it's so hard, because like you said, you're being victimized a second time, a third time, having to relive the situation all over again, and that's the last thing that you want to do. But what I can say is that we do offer victim liaisons, we do offer resources to our victims, so that way, as far as the legal part, the legal costs, they don't incur that. They don't have to be victimized a second time. They're guided in the right direction, from what I do know here in Fort Bend County. So as soon as a victim makes an outcry, we turn to our victim immediately and we offer them those resources, and we get them in contact with our victim liaison to start any kind of therapy, as Monica and Elizabeth said, that they didn't get immediately. Now we're trying to break that, is a different cycle that we're trying to break for our victims and offering them those resources.
May I add, in regards to that, just so everyone knows, and the listeners and viewers, the state legislators are getting ready to go into session in January, so this is a good time to talk to your legislators, your state representatives, your congressional leaders, your senatorial leaders, to talk about legislation around that particular subject matter, because we here don't have the power to, do legislation, but we have the power to vote for legislators to put those type of bills in place to where victims of domestic violence that survive and or their families of those survivors do not incur type of, civil suits until after the finalization of what the outcome of the crime was. Especially like in your case, he was found guilty. So that would mean that if they're found guilty, they can't file a civil suit, because now the justice has been done and has been served. So there's certain things, and I would definitely encourage you to talk to your legislator. If anyone needs to know, you can always go to your local municipality's website and look under there to see who your local legislators are in your prospective area.
And I do just want to add that this was Harris County, it was not Fort Bend.
Same.
So I know there's, things that may be different, but I'm pretty sure they can file a civil suit in Fort Bend County as well. But with Harris County, I mean, just the whole process, it took so long just for him to go to court. And with the DA, she just felt like there was a lot of things that she couldn't prove, even with all the pictures. So she, of course, DAs are trying to win, but she got that guilty for me. And that's what I needed, because I needed this civil suit to be dropped, But like I said, it's just, for me, because I'm still going through it and still experiencing it, it's been hard for me. So sometimes I tear up about it. Sometimes I try to just forget about it. But sometimes it creeps back in. So I have been to counseling. I've seen 2 different counselors. And I've stopped going to counseling because now I've turned to God to help get me through it. And with God and me praying, it's given me a lot more strength to be able to fight my way through it, I should say.
Yeah, and I'm sorry you're having to go through what you're going through, but this is an experience that I didn't know a victim could go through, and I'm glad you're bringing it to light, because we need to know that. Situations as in yours, I almost see it as a form of retaliation on the perpetrator's part, and I don't agree with that, and that's my personal opinion. But as an opinion as a whole, as Monica explained, if we can bring that, to the local or government level to be able to help support victims like you who are being re-victimized again, and that's something that's a big issue, and I would like to think that the case would be completely dropped on the civil part.
Well, no, it's going to be, but like I said, I mean, monetarily, I'm
Yeah.
kind of set back. But I mean, at this point, like I said, I'm just thankful that there was a guilty verdict. So.
I wanted to say, now, I do know in Harris County there's crime victim services. I don't know if that will be covered, but in the future, you might want to look into that, or if you know someone else that's going through that. They do cover some things, so that might be something that might help with that.
I got my medical taken care of.
Okay.
So I was referred to the right people when I initially went down.
Well, that's good.
So, yeah, they did take care of my medical expenses for me, which I was very grateful for. But like I said, it's still, like, I'm the victim, and like
Right.
you said, it's almost like being victimized all over again. So, yeah. But I do want to talk about signs and red flags that women or men may see. And I would like you guys to give me a take on it. Basically, sexual, as Monica has talked about, forcing you to participate in non-consensual acts, including sexual assault and rape, demeaning behaviors, infidelity, or exploitation. The physical, any behaviors that directly harm you physically, including violence such as assault or withholding needs like food, sleep, or housing. Isolation, I've been there. Preventing you from seeing family, friends, or attending social events. Control, eliminating freedom by controlling you from making your own choices, checking up on you obsessively, dictating your clothing or style choices, or using your children as leverage, as you ladies have mentioned. Emotional, targeting your insecurities or vulnerabilities, brainwashing. Verbal, using words to threaten, blame, or demean you, screaming and flying into rages. Male privilege, adhering to cultural beliefs that men must be dominant over women. Economic, your partner has complete control over your spending and income or squanders money on non-essentials. Experience of domestic abuse can often include many tactics at once. You might find verbal and emotional abuse go hand in hand, or your partner may control all your personal finances because of a belief that that's what men are supposed to do. So with all those that I've mentioned, with you guys being the expert, what is prevalent there? Do you feel more control, finance, sexual?
Sometimes it's a combination of everything that you said.
So with one victim,
One victim
all
can
those.
can experience every single thing that was just listed, and And as Monica said, and as Elizabeth said, to them it was normal because the reform with the push for victims for domestic violence didn't happen until the 80s, you know, with a case involving Tracy Thurman. That was the push for domestic violence to come to light. The terminology domestic violence was not used until the early 70s. So that's why now, like, a lot of the victims think it's normal. So I still feel like we're almost in the baby phase of trying to get information out there for our victims. You know, we're trying to break that stigma of victims not knowing everything that you listed. That is not normal. And we see this every case that has come across my desk or that I've dealt with on patrol itself, you know, in person. I would see victims try to hide their injuries, you know, wearing long sleeves during the summer. That's a telltale sign, you know, so we always ask them to pull up their clothing in areas that we can't visibly see to confirm that they have injuries in those areas, you know, so everything that you've listed there are telltale signs.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've seen every one of those signs. A lot of times and we are a culturally specific organization, so we really work with Black and brown women and men, but we don't turn anyone away. We see, especially in some communities where the husband is the breadwinner, then she doesn't have the means to do it. How am I gonna, I don't have money. I don't have education to get a job. I don't have money for childcare if I get a job. How am I gonna feed my children? Where am I gonna go? My family I'm isolated from my family already, so they're not talking to me. You know, how am I gonna get my kids to school? It's so many things that come into place that causes that fear and stifles that woman to feel like she has to stay. You know, statistics say that women and men, sometimes it takes 5 to 7 times for them to go through it before they actually leave. And as these two ladies said before, you have to have a plan. You can't just say, okay, I'm leaving today, because it doesn't work that way. You have to have a plan. You have to be working with someone. You have to have some type of help. Somebody that you trust, another friend, a family member, a coworker. I get lots of calls. Like you, I'm also a realtor, but people now that know that I work with domestic violence victims call me all the time and say, I have a coworker, can you talk to her? Or I have a friend or my neighbor. I've seen the bruises on her. I've heard the screaming and the yelling, or I've seen the children go to school dirty. You know, it's so many different things that go on that are a part of that, and it happens, and the fear that keeps you from leaving is that entire list that you named. All plays a part.
Can I touch on one thing? When you mentioned fear, the biggest fear, and we do not ask this because we do have a lot of foreigners that do come here to the United States and want to live here. Not just the religion, but also we don't ask for their legal status. Right. We do not ask for your legal status. We want to make sure that you as a victim are taken care of and that you're protected.
We don't either. We don't either. All we want to know is that you and your children are safe. Your status means absolutely nothing. And we work with, we manage a domestic abuse response team. It's called DART, and they don't either. They do not care about your status at all. It's about making sure that you are in a safe place and your children are safe.
Okay. So just listening to what you ladies said, are bystanders, do they come forward more so than the victims?
Yes. So being a 911 dispatcher and also hearing the calls, receiving the calls coming in, seeing the calls on patrol, and now investigating the calls, in my experience, we see the reports that come in anonymously. We've had check welfares, especially in apartment complexes, as you said, because they could hear the thudding, they can hear the screaming, they can hear the yelling, they hear children crying, they see, you know, if you see something, say something. We've heard that before, you know, and as a child myself, you know, there was things I would try to give clues to family and friends when I did see them, and they didn't cue in sometimes, or they would, and I would be too afraid to say something. Why? Because there's a stigma attached to, as you said, when children are involved, CPS. But CPS actually offers resources, including counseling to children, if they're involved in anything, including family violence.
Now, Sophie, you mentioned that there may be housing available for women who don't have the financial means.
Yes, so there is temporary housing that is offered to our victims that would be coordinated through our victim liaison or an advocate that is assigned to our victims. And typically the Women's Shelter in Fort Bend County, they do help a lot of our victims in Fort Bend County. And also men too. I've had cases with men. I know you asked previously about seeing men involved in this and involved in family violence. And I've seen protective orders for men. So there are also protective orders that the victims can in Fort Bend County. You can apply at the district attorney's office, and they will review your case. We cannot be the ones to deny your request because you have to go through an application process through the district attorney's office to obtain that.
Gotcha. Okay. And for you working with the survivors, do you have any type of programs that you can mention to us?
Yes, we do help women and men. And we also partner with other nonprofits in the area. We work with Houston Area Women's Center and some other partners that we partner with. So we do our best to get you either in temporary housing first to get you safe, and then we do work with other partners to get you transitional housing. So whatever we need to do to get you back acclimated into life and be safe on your own with your children, we do that. We have several partners. So if I get that phone call, which we get phone calls 24/7, and like I said, I get a lot of personal friends that have seen things that refer someone to me, then if I can't help them, I have partners that we partner with where we can see, I can call and say, okay, I have someone, she has 2 children, we can get you food, we can get you clothing, we can get diapers, we can get you a hotel room temporarily until we can get you some more transitional housing, whatever it is to get them safe.
I know that we talked a lot about like families and helping those, moms transition with their kids, but what about those that don't have children? So like in my case back then, I didn't have any children. So it was more like just a single person. Are there resources out there to help individuals without children?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, like I said, we help everyone. We are, like I said, we are culturally specific. We work with more brown and black people because we're the ones that are most underserved. That's why the CEO started this nonprofit. But we don't turn anyone down. Okay. If you call and you need help, we will get you help. Whether we have it or not, we have several partners that we partner with throughout Harris County, and we will find somebody to get you what you need. Just 2 weeks ago, we had some beds donated. Someone called me and said, I am just got a new home. I was in a domestic violence situation. I don't have beds for my babies. I have an air mattress. They're sleeping on the floor, and we're sleeping on an air mattress. So we got somebody to deliver her 2 sets of bunk beds. If we get donations from different organizations, Amazon, we get a lot from Amazon. So I can get you diapers, I can get you wipes, I can get you formula. There's some other partners that we work with. If I don't have it, like I say, I will call them and say, this is what this person needs. Can you help them? So we work with a lot of people where we will get you what you want. And there are a lot of organizations within the city. If I can get you in a hotel for a couple of days, then they will do transitional housing where they help you get into an apartment. They will pay your first month's rent. They'll pay your deposit. There even some places will even help to pay for you to get a mover, to move, to get you furniture. It's just getting connected with someone that has those partners where we can make that call and get those things out to you.
And so how do people get in contact with you, or how do they connect to your organization? Is there a website? Is there an email? How do they reach out to you?
Yes. We have a website. It's called theempoweredsurvivor.org. Also, I have an email that I check daily. It's info@empoweredsurvivor.org also. And then just, unfortunately, calling my cell phone number.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now I have to ask, Sophie, because I don't know if you've been in this situation. What causes women, and you guys can chime in if you like, what causes women, when you're called on a domestic case, if they try to take the man down and he's beating her, what causes her to say, stop hitting him after he's already abused her? Do you know the mental mindset of why a woman would say that? When she's being beaten and then she sees, them trying to take him down or apprehend him.
I've experienced this firsthand on scenes on patrol where I am fixing to take in custody the aggressor and I have the victim pulling on me or my district partner pulling the victim away from me after she's begging me to not take, or he sometimes, not to take their spouse into custody. It's because, like you said, it's the cycle of them, because you go through what's called the honeymoon phase, where everything is fine. And then there's, as what y'all said earlier, the triggers, little things that start to happen. Then you have your big breaking point, and then that's when the assault happens. And then the apology comes, and then gifts come, and then you go back into the honeymoon phase. That is the cycle. And so they are wanting us to make it okay when it's not okay, and we have to be that voice for them, either it be on scene or in cases where people call and say, hey, I know of someone that needs help, to recognize those signs. And I feel like it's because, as I said before, they still think it's okay. They don't know that it's wrong. And that's why I want to say that even if it's happening in that moment, it's so hard. As much as I want to take that person to the side, the victim, and tell them, hey, this is wrong, you need help. We're here to save your life by putting this person in custody and document it on paper to get you help.
Let me piggyback on that. I think it all comes to a place to where it's separation.
Yes.
And it's a mental separation. So what it is that, okay, he's over here and he's doing all kinds of violations, right? But then there's that part, oh, but I still love him. So when she's being rescued. Now, this was not my story, but she's being rescued, and she's seeing the man that she loves. Although she's battered, she sees that because now she totally forgotten that, he was beating her across the head or whatever. But she sees that the person that she cares for is now in a compromising situation. She don't want that for him. Mm-hmm. Right? And I never, honestly, even though I am a survivor, and I praise God for that, I never mentally understood that, even in my profession, and even me going to college to understand it. Even when I'm on the streets and I'm helping other women, I can honestly say I never understood that.
And it ties in with the mental manipulation and the control. That's how much control that they have over their victims, that the victim themselves cannot stand up for themselves, but you can.
Can I add something to that? It's probably going to be in contrast to what you guys are saying, but from my experience and from dealing with a lot of survivors, the one thing that I heard consistently, and I even shared myself, is it's not necessarily the mindset of what they have played on you and the manipulation they put, but when you don't want that person in custody, because I went through that with my other domestic violence situation. I had to leave with, this is the one I had my first child with. I did have to leave because it was 5 o'clock in the morning, and we were tearing that apartment up. And completely demolished the entire bathroom. I had been thrown into the tiles all through there, punching through sheetrock, like it was completely demolished. And I left. I was able to leave and escape because he had worn himself out, and I had worn myself out trying to go back and forth. And I went to the police station, reported it. They were going to come over, and I had agreed. I said, I just want y'all to come talk to him because this is my provider. This is the man that I love, and I just want you to come talk to him. And they came and talked, and they asked, where did it happen? And I said, it happened in the bathroom. One officer was talking to him. The other officer walked into the bathroom, saw the bathroom, asked the other officer to come and see the bathroom, saw the bathroom, and they both walked out, and they said, I'm sorry, but you're going into custody. And they arrested him on the spot, and I freaked out because from my lens, that's not what I thought was going to happen. And the other part that kicked in is I still love him. I love the good parts of him. And that's what a lot of women have said to me and shared their stories, and I felt the same way. I could feel that, is we love the good part of you. And we felt like that there was more good in you than those incidental wrongs in you. And so I want to make sure I'm being sensitive to that, but also clarifying it is manipulation, but we also sometimes we take on that position of, I still love him. Like, he was a good person and there's still good in him, and you don't want to see the good part of him go down with the bad part of him, if that makes sense.
That's that
Stockholm syndrome, yes.
Yeah.
And I think and to touch on what you're saying is about, because you still hold hope for them. You
Yes.
hope that they're going to change for you.
Yes.
And I think that's what your point is being, and it's very, very true, that you hope that it's going to be different the next time.
Yes.
And how many next times are there going to be?
Yes, and there needs to be a label, which you guys have shared there, but there needs to be a lot of education around that part so that people understand why it is important for law enforcement to intervene on your behalf. Because we can't have only the mindset of, and if you've heard what we've all been saying here, is the reason she can't leave or doesn't want to leave, it's not because of her life. It's not so that she's not beaten to death or murdered in a lot of cases. It's always because I don't have anyone to take care of me and my children. And so there has to be more education around that and help people understand what love truly is. Love does not hurt. Love is not painful. Love does not give you black eyes and scars that have to take time to heal. Love is perfect. Love is gentle. Love is kind. And there also needs to be more resources and legislation around that as well, and more opportunities for, counseling, because we've all kind of talked about all the three of those things as well. And I would like to see the listeners, any legislators that are watching, I know we have Niecy Hamilton in the audience as well, survivor, and she's a huge advocate. So I think when this is done, we need to put measures in place to have better outcomes for legislation, training, education, counseling, resources, and funding for all of these mechanisms that women and survivors, including men, are dealing with after the math.
So let me just touch base on that as well. When you just mentioned Dr. Niecy, and thank you for being here. One of being in partnership, and I love what you were saying. I definitely need to get more information on what you provide and the services that you do render to those who are in need, and I love that. It really touched my spirit. But also, too, Dr. Niecy is in the audience. As you were saying, she is in partnership. I'm in a partnership, actually, with her in Resilience is beauty for domestic violence, and it's in also it allows the survivor to be empowered, right? And I love that, and I love the fact that you have such a variety of experts on the panel, because although we are survivors and you're coming out, we are now in a position to where there's resource that I did not have, and I don't know if she has. And the beauty of it all is, Tiki, is that you now have it. Those of us did not, but you do. right? So that's really warms my heart to know that you don't have to walk those long roads and that journey as we did trying to figure it out when you have an expert in the audience and you have those beside you. So,
Now, one thing I did want to say, with our nonprofit, we not only have those things that I was saying, but what we try to do is when we have the DART team that I mentioned earlier, we have forensic nurses that we manage that go out, and because we collaborate with Houston Police Department and with Houston Area Women's Center, some other nonprofits. But what we try to do is have our advocates to follow up. Our nurses, what they do is they follow up 24 hours later if there is a major case. Someone that's been strangled, to make sure that even if she or he decides, I don't want to go to the hospital or I don't want anything extra, just to follow up, because I've learned there's a lot that can happen after that strangulation. Working with those nurses, I've learned so very much. They follow up 24 hours later to make sure that they're okay, that nothing has transpired after that, because something can transpire 24 hours, 6 months, a year later, and it can cause death. Our advocates also follow up. We also do have where we call that person back to check on them to see how things are going, if they're okay. We also follow up later, 6 months down the road, 30 days down the road. We have survivors that call us continuously a year later or 6 months later, where we've helped them or they referred someone else to us. So we try to keep that going, because that's something that it doesn't end. And like you said, a lot of people just don't get counseling because of the stigma. And I wanted to go back on what we were talking about before. A lot of times, the issue is that he or she is my breadwinner. I can't do anything without this person. So if you take them into custody, now not only do I love them and don't want to see that happen, but now what are we going to do? We can't eat. I can't feed my babies. I can't buy diapers. I can't buy milk. And then we've had several cases where I literally talked to a lady. She said, I just want some relief today. So she's going to go back. We know she's going to go back. But I call the police because I need him to stop hitting me right now, unfortunately. But in due time, when she's ready, then she's going to get out once she makes that plan.
So just according to doing some research, there's actually 11 reasons why women stay in abusive relationships. 1, they hope the abuser will change one day. They are afraid of their abuser. 3, they blame themselves for everything. 4, they want to protect their children. 5, they may be wary of their partner's social standing. That's different. But I mean, it could be a government official or somebody like that. That's true. That is true.
I've had that before. We've had, I had someone flee from another state to Texas, and she fled somewhere else before, and he was in law enforcement. And so he was connected all over. So wherever she went, they found her. She changed her name, they found her. And it's like, what do you do?
It's so funny that you say that, because I was so scared to go file charges, because the guy that I was dating, he knew the police chief, and he knew other people in law enforcement, and I was scared that they were just going to sweep my case up under the rug because they knew him so well. But God told me, no, you do what you need to do, and you do what's right and best for you. So that's why I went ahead and filed, and the detective, he reassured me. He says, oh, no. He says, this is not going to happen. You don't have to worry about it getting swept under the rug. So I was happy about that.
And my thing is, I'm glad you did that, because not only worrying about it getting swept under the rug, he's going to go out and do it to somebody else, whether he finds you or not. If he does, like, is going to repeat that cycle. That's something else that I'm really passionate about. We can do a lot of work and help a lot of victims, but if we don't help the actual abuser, all we're going to do is continue to spin that cycle. And that's the thing that we have to break. But I'm glad that you did that, because you not only saved your life, you saved somebody else's life. Yeah.
Okay, number 6, they fear isolation. Number 7, they question their self-worth. Been there. Number 8, they feel pressured to live up to society's image. Number 9, they feel embarrassed to admit the truth. Number 10, they feel they can save their partner, like you ladies talked about. And then they may believe abuse is normal behavior. Wow, that's really deep. And those are a lot of reasons, and I can see at least 5 of them here of why I stayed in my situation. But let's talk about the impact of domestic violence and what it can cause. I know depression is one, post-traumatic stress, even substance abuse or alcohol. Self-esteem. I will definitely say, after I got out of my situation, I mean, I felt worthless. I mean, I felt hopeless. I felt like I wasn't good enough. When you put your heart and soul into a relationship and you try to take care of that other individual and they put their hands on you and even almost try to kill you, I mean, it's like, what's the point? And for me, I just felt like, wow, you know, I gave what I could, and this is how I get treated. So, and then I had to give myself grace because I beat myself up for probably about 11 months afterwards. I mean, I beat myself up so bad. I got diagnosed with a sleep disorder. I was on medication just to sorry. But yeah, so, and I even went through a state of depression. I've actually had to go through depression twice. The first was emotional abuse. I was engaged to someone, and he just kept coming up with all these things of who he thought I was. He kept asking me these strange questions, just saying things like, you know, well, have you ever stripped? And I'm like, no. You know, he even told me one Sunday after church, he says, I went through your closet. I said, for what? He says, because I was trying to find a porno that you might have made. I'm like, what? So, I mean, every little thing that I did, he wanted to know every place that I was going to be. One day I would just say, hey, I'm going to run errands. Well, I need to know what errands you're going to run. And I'm like, what do you mean? Yeah. You know, I'm going to the grocery store. Okay, and what else you doing? There was a time when I tore my ACL, and I had rehabilitation appointments to go to. And he says, well, I need to know where you're going to be, what time you're going to be there, and what doctor you're seeing. I mean, it was just like, I felt so trapped, you know, and then he attacked my character. He made me feel like I wasn't the person that I knew that I was. And that itself, those scars were even harder to heal from than the physical because they were more emotional. And I will admit, and I'm being transparent, one night I was at home. I took a gun and put it to my head. Because I felt like I wasn't worth it. But my spirit told me, no, Takia, you are worth it. And I put that gun down, and I immediately called my mom. I didn't tell her what I had done. I told my dad a couple of days later. But it was hard, just trying to get past all of that. It took me 6 years to get over that emotional abuse. 6 years. And then, of course, the physical comes later on. So I'm sorry that, but it's a lot. So, you know, but every day I wake up, I thank God for allowing me to see another day, you know, for me to get it right and for me to continue to give myself grace. And for me to realize that I'm beautiful. You know, I do have a man who loves me very much. He treats me well, you know, so I realize I am worth it. And that I just have to keep pushing and healing, and I'll be just fine. So, yeah.
You're going to thrive.
You know, you're a lot stronger than you think you are.
Took me a long
Because
time to realize that.
we've all been there at some place. You know, I used to slap myself in the mirror and call myself a monkey because that's what he said I was. Right? So we've all been there. I've taken pills and only to wake up and I was like, oh man, you know? Because when those things happen, because you become so low and you can't even believe it, because especially if it's something you've never experienced, and then you call yourself loving somebody and you're giving them your heart, so you gave yourself away. And you didn't leave anything for God. You just gave it all away to someone that didn't even deserve it. So you're constantly trying to show your worth. Like, I'm worth it. And they keep saying, no, you're not. Right? But we're so glad that you didn't pull the trigger. We're so glad that the enemy didn't win. And we're so glad that 6 years later that you're able to purge yourself. Because those experience was only a trap of the enemy, right? And his job is to steal, to kill, and to destroy the very essence of who we are. We are great women that is here, and he doesn't want this because there's so many of us that still need to come out of the darkness. There's so many of them that still need to hear from me, from her, from you, and the resources that are down there. My story is a little different. We've all been hurt. You've all have seen some experience. You talked about your mom, but we all have a reason why we're sitting here. I never, ever experienced that, but I had an image. I was praising the Lord, and as you know my story, I was getting beat up at night, too afraid to tell my friends. You know, my house was nice, my cars was nice, my clothing were nice, but at night I was either getting choked or raped by my husband. You know, and then to have them to turn on your children or your child. There was no safe place for me. Who am I going to tell? There's no place to hide in a home because he had keys to everything. I did not rely on him to provide for me. I didn't rely on if I left, where would I go? I was just afraid to leave because the word, I will kill you, come out your mouth. He followed me to church. He followed me to my job. Right now, today, I don't go to the grocery store. My husband, praise God, with his wonderful self does. I don't go to the grocery store. And when I do go, it's very brief. Because why? He will be in the grocery store. And now, you know, this is so many years, decades later. So the residue, some things still stay. Because we stop growing right there. Until God has to touch that part, right? So I'm glad to be a part of this panel because abuse is abuse, whether it's verbal, whether it's physical, whether it's mental. Most times, oftentimes, it's generational. That the men that we've chosen saw a father or a mom inflict something on someone, and it empowered them, and they thought, that's strength. I'm going to make her do this, or I'm going to have him to do that. So we don't know that right away. We just know that we wake up from being asleep because all of a sudden someone decides they want to put their hands on us.
Elizabeth, if you don't mind sharing, tell us about your blessing that you received when you left the house, about your plan.
Oh, wow.
If you don't mind sharing.
I don't mind, thank you. So what happened was I went to church one night, and my ex-husband at the time, he was so controlling that he needed to know every move I made. He wanted to know who I was with, where I was. And so I could only go to church. That was my only safe place. So I went to church, and he would call the church phone. And every church phone back then, they had a phone in the lobby, and it would ring, and it would ring, and it would ring. And so someone in the church would go and say, "Church, da-da-da-da-da, can I help you?" He's like, "Yeah, may I speak to Liz?" So they looking for me all in the church. I go to the phone, and he has something to say, and I hurry up and hang up the phone, and I'm trying to truck home because I know that there's a problem. And when I get home, this particular time we argued, but we were in revival all week. So I go back the next day because I know God's going to deliver me. So I go back the next day. Now the time is starting to become late. And I'm looking at my clock, and the time is getting late. And I'm like, oh, my God, I need to hurry up and get home because, you know, I got to be home at a certain time. So as I run to the back of the door to leave, the pastor at the time calls my name. And I'm like, oh, Lord. So he asked me to come down the aisle, and I walk down the aisle. And as I go, he tells me that the Lord tells him that he is going to deliver me from my situation. And if I want to be delivered, Monica, raise your hand. And you know most people raise their hand because it's the church thing to do, right? Yep. And if not, he says that I will be with you. I will be with you. You're going to go through some things, but I'll never leave you. Well, I'm from the hood. I'm from Long Beach, Compton. So with that being said, I was like, I'm a gambler. I'm a gambler. Lord, you said if I raise my hand, you'll deliver me. And if I don't, I'm going to go through some things. So I decided I wasn't raising my hand. So the people at the church was like, raise your hand, raise your hand. Raise your hand, baby. Let the Lord change it, you know. But no, I didn't want that. So he asked other people to come down, and I'll speed up my story. All the people that you touched their lives, so you could see that you're worthy. And I look around, there's at least 100 people. But I didn't care about that. I was looking at my watch like, oh, my God, okay, that's great, praise the Lord, but I'm finna get beat up when I go home. You know what I mean? And I'm praise the Lord that I saved you. Praise the Lord I helped you. That's great, but I need to get home. So I put my head down. I said, I don't want it. And the pastor tells me to stand up, and then he gives me some instructions, and I dart out the door. I don't even remember half the other stuff he said because the only thing I'm thinking about, oh, my God, I need to get home. I drive home, and sure enough, the enemy was waiting for me. I opened the door. He was a monster. He was angry. He was mad, and he wanted to fight. So what he does is that I walk through the door. He slings me to the door. My daughter at the time, she's 34, but she was 12 then. She jumps on his back and says, leave my mother alone, because that's what little girls are going to do. He slings her to the wall. Now, what you do to me is one thing, but when you turn it on my child, all bets off. So I see blood from my daughter's mouth against the wall. I pick her up from the floor. I tell her to go into the room, shut the door. No matter what you hear, do not come out, because I believe I was going to die that night. And I say, do not come out this room. No matter what you hear, don't come out this room. And she's like, okay, Mommy. So she goes in the room, shuts the door, and then I go out, and now we're fighting. We're tussling, right? So, and we're fighting so much till we're tired, like you said in one of your introductions. So then we fall asleep, and I wake up, and he's raping me, knocked out. I get up, and I go to work the next day. The Holy Spirit tells me, he directs my path, tells me to go to this particular apartment on my lunch break, and I go. I go in this particular apartment on my lunch break, and I sit, and I ask for the manager. The manager comes. I tell her my story. But then I pull out of my hand and I only had 37 cents. And she says, how much do you have for your deposit? I said, I only have 37 cents. She said, okay. So she walks away. She comes back. She has a piece of paper. May I borrow this? She has a piece of paper, and she's writing all these things down. And then she says, here's your lease. She said, and 37 cents is enough.
Praise God.
So then I go, and she goes and she says to me, she gives me a brand new apartment, 2 bedrooms, a car garage. But the beauty of it is, and this is why this story is so significant, because miracles happen. Yes. And so she takes this lease, I sign it. She goes and she decorates the apartment. I don't tell my daughter. My daughter's thinking, Monica, is that we're going to go see a friend, but it's the key to our new beginning. She puts the key in the door, she opens it, and it says, welcome home, Danielle. Oh, wow. And my daughter is crying because she doesn't believe it. She doesn't believe it. She doesn't believe it. My daughter is crying because she does not believe it. And so in the midst of this, thank you, in the midst of this, the apartment's puts us next, brand new apartment, put us next to the police officer who's going to secure my building. Not only do they do that, she takes the 37 cents and she said, when can you pay your rent? I'm going to let you move in for 37 cents this month, but next month this is what your rent would be. So we move in, but before I leave, she said, tomorrow I'm going to send 2 movers to your house. And this is the time they're going to come to your home. And I said, okay. He that waits on the Lord. So I said, okay. I go home. It's a Saturday, the door knocks, he's ready to go bananas. And he goes down to the door and he opens it and he said, I am here to move Miss Jackson. He said, ain't nobody moving out of here. It wasn't just one man. It was 2 very big, tall, black brothers that was just like, she moving. And not only that, this beautiful Caucasian woman walked straight behind them upstairs to my apartment and said, she's leaving. And she gathered me and my daughter. And I said, I want that. He can keep that. You can take that. And they moved us into our brand new apartment for 37 cents. So you cannot say that there's not a God. And miracles does happen. But had we had the resources that you have and Dr. Nisi had, I would have had a place to go. But God gave me a miracle at church. And only thing I wanted to do was hurry up and get home so I don't get beat up. But that was my deliverance. Because I prayed and I begged and I asked God, you don't see how this man is beating up on me. And I serve you and I pay my tithes and I'm a very involved person in the church. You have to come through for me, God. But with 37 cents, God gave me a miracle. And with that miracle, I got out of that situation. We moved into our apartment. I then decided I was going to help other women. And that's where Broken Vessels came from, to renew, to restore what has been broken. And that's my nonprofit. So I praise God for that. And thank you for sharing that, asking me to share that.
Of course.
37 cents.
When I first heard it, I just thought that was amazing. And that was her blessing. Indeed. Indeed.
37 cents. Wow.
So I have to ask Miss Sophie, was
Yes.
there anyone there to help your mom when she decided to finally leave?
So hearing Elizabeth tell her story, it was almost like having flashbacks from my childhood and witnessing my mom go through her abuse. And at the time, no, there was no resources. And we were living on couches with family. And unfortunately, you know, my dad knew where all of my family lived. So it was really hard. We were bouncing from living room to living room. And no, we did not have those resources compared to what's available today for the victims, even in the with the children, because there are children that are also involved with domestic violence, and we do have the Fort Bend Advocates for the children, and they have a great resources for them to help them deal with the trauma of going through situations with family violence. You know, they have specialists that speak with children in order to get, you know, statements so that way we can use it in court on the legal side. But what Elizabeth said, her testimony is beautiful. And I hope it really touches someone who's sitting on the other side listening that needs the help. You know, because your story is just like my mom's story. My father told my mom, the only way that you're going to survive is selling yourself on the street. And so as soon as she heard those words, and as soon as he made the threats towards us directly about taking our lives, she said, this has to stop, this has to change. And she herself put herself through nursing school for a year. A year later, went right back and went to law enforcement. So she became a medical nurse, was her foot in the door. And so every single time she shared her story to friends that she would see going through the same abuse, they said, wow, you gained your own power back. You didn't let him win you over by saying that you're going to fail in life. And I greatly appreciate hearing your story, because hearing your story normalizes what other people are going through, that think that am I going crazy? Is this normal? Because I do hear my victims say that when they give their statements to me. They'll ask me at the very end, is this normal? Am I the only one? And I tell them, no, you're not the only one. And again, thank you for that testimony. It was beautiful.
Can you tell us why you got into law enforcement?
Yes. So seeing my mom make an impact within her own community where we live, I never saw myself being a police officer. I actually resented my mom for wanting to become a police officer. I hid it from my family and from, well, actually my friends in school. And so my mom taught me a big lesson. I was sick one day, and she had to pick me up from school. And I said, Mom, can you please wear your nursing uniform when you pick me up? And she said, okay. So she knew my bell schedule, and she walked in her law enforcement uniform. And everybody in the hallway, all my friends were like, hey, your mom's a cop, your mom's a cop. And they looked up to her. And then I realized, you know what? That's not such a bad thing to be a police officer. You know, and my friends would tell me, hey, you know what? This officer helped my family out when I needed it. It's so cool that your mom's a police officer. And I decided that I wanted to break that cycle and be like my mom and create a pathway for other people and be the voice for them. You know, because I didn't want to live that life. You know, now I have a daughter myself, and she's 3, and I want to give her everything I didn't have growing up as a child. And I want her to know that seeing the physical abuse happening with anyone, I want her to be educated. And like you said, you know, the education part, you know, and that's where we're trying to break the barrier between the community and law enforcement with the training that they do provide us with domestic violence. We do have classes that we do go to, and we do train on it, and it's classes that I do like to go to because the information that they provide to us is just amazing. and they want us to be on a scene or when we get call-outs to recognize what those signs are. Because there's some people, they may be in law enforcement, but they don't know anything about dating violence. Because dating violence is a big issue too, and that's why I became a police officer, and then that's why I decided to become a detective, and I was hoping that they would put me in a unit that I'm in currently, which is the Family Violence Unit, and I'm super, super happy to be where I'm at, to be able to help, victims that, that go through things like these. I want to be able to be there for them and vouch for them when they can't, when they feel like they can't, or they feel like they don't have the power to do it.
That's amazing. That is so amazing. So I know that you help survivors. Have you ever been physically abused in any type of way?
No, I have not been physically abused, but I was emotionally abused and did not realize it until I started this work. Listening to other women, I realized, and I told the director that I can't believe I've lived through this situation in a prior relationship. It was really crazy how that light came on, and I realized that I have done that. I have not gotten counseling, but I have pushed others to get counseling. And I've told my story when I needed to, when God says you need to tell them, because we did classes with women where we helped them to find employment and do other things to help empower them, because we want to empower women, give them their power back. So when that time permits, then I will tell my story. Sometimes I feel like, excuse me, like my story is not that major or important because I haven't lived through with some of the horrible things that I've heard. But I know it is. I know that my story is important, like your story is important. It's just not, I just feel like it's not as much. But you know how you know it is, but sometimes you feel like, no, what I have to say means absolutely nothing compared to what you've gone through. So I don't always tell my story, but I have. And I never thought about it because I just thought, that's just the way that people talk to you. But I never thought about, this is not correct, the things that he said, until later on in life. But a lot of people don't realize that you don't think about verbal abuse really being abuse. Most people think about, when you think domestic violence, someone is physically hurting you. Someone's giving you a black eye or breaking a bone or doing something like that, but it is not. It really isn't.
So, Monica, you talked about generational, about seeing it and then having to live it, thinking that it was the norm. I've noticed that in our society, as Black and brown families, we've always been told to keep quiet, that our business needs to stay in the house and nobody else needs to know. I don't know where I got my speaking up from, but I just feel like when it's wrong, it's wrong. So how do you feel about that, about the generational? I know with your girls, I mean, gosh, you have some amazing girls at Radical Rileys, oh my goodness. I know you do everything to protect your children. So do you feel like you've broken that generational curse with your babies?
I do, from an educational standpoint. I think it's important that we, one, break the silence on that stereotype that what happens in this house stays in this house. It's something that we grew up as, Black families, because it goes back to our grandparents, our parents before them, is what happens in this house stays in the house. Because there was back then domestic violence going on, there was a lot of shame taking place back from our ancestors, because I know that my grandparents on my mother's side, there was abuse, physical abuse in that relationship, and it of course got passed down to verbal abuse, to to the children. And then my mom was in the same domestic violence. So it's generational. And I think if you that are a product of domestic violence and you've lived through domestic violence, I believe it is your responsibility and obligation to educate your children and as many people as you possibly can, because it may not happen to your children, but it could happen to your children's friends. And so you educating and breaking that silence, talking about what really happened in the household, what that looks like, why it's not supposed to be, why it's not acceptable or tolerated, and setting standards. You have to talk to your children about it, men and women, male and female children, either way, as well as have them be also voices for their friends. I know me personally, my daughters, because of the conversations and the education, they were able to help their friends identify when they were in domestic violence relationships. And they also kind of help navigate them through that process of what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. So it is key to talk about it. That's one thing I can honestly say I love about Nisi. She is a big mouth when it comes to domestic violence and what is wrong, and get out there, and I say that on purpose because it's basically saying she does not stop talking about it. And it's important. The more people talk about it, the more the evil is exposed. And we know that the devil cannot thrive on truth. He's the author of confusion and manipulation and deceitfulness and deception. Everything that is opposite to God. You have to bring all darkness to light in order to expose it and destroy it. So I don't want my kids and my girls being in the situations that I was in, because my parents didn't know what I was dealing with the multiple times. And one of my parents, my mother kept sending me back to my abuser because she didn't want to be bothered with me. And as a result, I almost lost my life multiple times. I don't eat fried chicken to this day, because I got sick of frying it every single day of my life. And if it was not perfect, crisp, brown, and whatever else juicy, I got my tail toe up all around that apartment behind some goddamn fried chicken. Okay? And so as a result of that, if you don't tell your story, talk about it, expose it, you just gonna repeat it, your kids gonna repeat it, your kids' friends gonna repeat it, your kids' kids are gonna repeat it. It's just gonna keep on being like a cancer of domestic violence. It's gonna be an infestation. And it happens in black and brown communities because we don't talk about it, we don't expose it, and we don't even go to the church and tell the church what's going on about it. So talk about it. And you have to call an abuser an abuser. You got to tell people who they are, because they need to be the ones that are ashamed, not us. They need to be exposed, not us. There's more of us as survivors than there are those abusers. And we have more power and strength because we are fearfully and wonderfully made.
Absolutely. Awesome. Wow. Liz, I do have to ask, was your daughter tainted by anything that she saw from the abuse?
I believe so. I believe that right now today that she is dealing with intimacy as far as not just sexual, but to be able to connect. Yeah. I think that she finds solace in her children, but the choices of men that she chooses or have chosen, I have taken responsibility for it, because she's witnessed me stain. She witnessed me stain. She witnessed me coming with an excuse. She witnessed me try to cover, to protect, to hide, and she witnessed me lying.
Tell the truth so we can break free.
And so I take responsibility for that. and she's 34. I take responsibility that she is not in a good relationship.
That's so good.
I take responsibility for that. What are we doing for it now? I've a very good relationship with my daughter, but the darkness that lies within her, she doesn't allow me to reach. She gives me surface. But I take responsibility because I created that. For a little girl who didn't even know anything about that, she just knew to go to school and to be cute and to be a cheerleader and have fun like boys. But now she's leery. What we're doing now is that I'm taking the 12-year-old that stopped growing because she saw her mother being abused. And I'm nurturing that 12-year-old in my daughter now. So what does that look like? It looks like a lot of work that I'm willing to do. It's a lot of prayer. It's a lot of crying. It's a lot of forgiveness. It's a lot of owning up to it. It's a lot of anger that comes out of her mouth. It's a lot. But I'm here for the journey to fix it.
Miss Sophie, with you growing up, you had 4 brothers or sisters?
Yes, 1 brother and 3 sisters.
Okay, and did any of that abuse affect you guys and your siblings?
It did. So for myself, as she was speaking about her, as Elizabeth speaking about her daughter, you start to become reserved with your emotions. You want to protect yourself from being hurt again, not just by, obviously by the abuser himself, but anyone else that could come in and want to hurt you in the same way. And so, yes, unfortunately, there was, signs here and there. We were real, the emotional trauma of it, dealing with it for years. But fortunately, we had, family and my mom especially, even though we saw my mom at the weakest points, with black eyes, busted, bleeding from the mouth. As y'all said, the house torn apart. That was normal for us growing up. I lived, in poverty, areas of poverty. We didn't know what furniture was because my dad was so controlling of the finances. He wanted to use it for alcohol and drugs, and he would rather see us go hungry. And my mom made sure in any way or fashion or form, she would find a way to make sure that we were fed every single night. Either it be leftovers or she would get scraps of food together. I remember going underneath the house, and we lived in a very, very old house where it was wooden slat floors. You could see beneath, and I was small enough to crawl underneath, and I would find loose change. And I would go to the corner store, and the guy knew that we were from a domestic abuse family. And same situation where you said with the 37 cents, I walked in with $1 and I think it was like 25 cents. And he said, "What do you need?" And I said, "I need bread and meat for my family." And I knew I didn't have enough. And he gave me a whole loaf of bread and a whole pack of bologna, enough to feed my siblings for that night. So,
Always sends angels, right?
yes, most definitely. And he was one of them, but it's also about education, and I feel like maybe if he, and I put no blame on anyone, I don't blame them for not being the ones to be that voice for us when we needed the help. But it just goes back, like the financial security, I've always been paranoid about not having enough money or not having enough food. It's just the little things that build to the bigger things later on, the stress, the anxiety, and my siblings, we all dealt with some form or fashion from it. And of course, the fear of our dad returning. And he did call out of the blue one day, And hearing his voice was so chilling on the phone. You know, and my mom stood her ground and said, don't you ever call our house again. And that was it. That was the last time. I was the last person in the family to, as far as the siblings go, to speak with him. So there's always still that fear always still stays with you.
I have to ask all of you ladies before we get ready to shut the program down, with the men in your lives, how have you learned to move on and trust other men? You've gone on to marry. Monica, you've gone on to marry. I don't know if you're married, Sophie, or not, but how do you get to the point where you're able to trust a man again, to actually understand that he will protect you and not hurt you?
I will say the biggest thing was I never saw any of those triggers, those red flags that I missed the first few times. He didn't possess any of those. It's important for me that I was in Christ by this time so that I could learn the discerning spirit, judging the spirit by the spirit. He just displayed all of the golden flags, I'll say, like the streets are paved with gold in heaven. He displayed true godly characteristics. His love was his love. His truth was his truth. His action was his action. He was always, and keep in mind, he didn't know any of my past when we met, when we married. He did not find out about the abuse until way into the marriage, until I started talking about it, you know. So he never knew about triggers and trauma and stuff like that, even though he came from a family. His parents, there was domestic violence as well, but he was a gentle soul. And he was there to protect his mom when he became an adult. Because there's two sides. The man can either go to be the protector or he become the abuser, and he made a choice. So for me, he displayed the godly characteristics, and because I was educated, I knew what to look for. I knew what I wanted, what I didn't want, and he was just a wonderful man. I've never, ever, ever said anything to him about, you act just like such and such, or you did that just like such and such, or I made sure that I was healed before I went into a relationship, because he was such a good man, and I did not want to ruin a good thing that God had brought into my life, and I wanted to be that good thing that the man finds. When the man finds a wife, he finds a good thing. So I wanted to be that good thing for him. I did not want to be broken. I did not want to be this traumatized little bird that needs to be fixed and held and being delicate. I want you to have the best parts of me. The whole parts of me. He's such a good man. He deserved to have the best wife, just like I felt like I deserved to have the best husband. And so I think a lot of it is, if you need counseling, get counseling. Do not jump into another relationship until you are whole, until you are healed and delivered and set free, and you've forgiven yourself. And even though I didn't know those things then, I just knew for me, I just wanted to have this good thing in my life, and I wanted to be his good thing. And so decades later, we still act like lovebirds and honeymooners, and we still, you know, talk about each other, you know, even though he's younger than I am. But I think it's important that you just be a healed and whole person, and you let God send you that right man for your life, and you be that right woman for him when he comes into your life. And because there is life after abuse, there is life after trauma, there is more than just being a survivor. There is such thing as being a thriver. And I think it's important that you also, you know, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. So as a man thinketh, so he is. So I know I'm a great woman, and because I believe that, I act like that, I walk like that, I live like that. Amen.
What about you, Miss Liz?
Well, that's beautiful. I think that's beautiful. But I wasn't looking for that. I just wanted something opposite of what was of me. I wanted someone that that I felt that I could control. I'm just being honest. I felt like I wanted someone that that I could basically say, we ain't doing that, and not have to worry about getting my teeth knocked out of my mouth, right? I was excited to have someone that thought that I was just this amazing individual, but he still had flaws. But what I would like to say is that what God gave me, He gave me a whole new thought process on what it is to have someone love you, right? And trust and believe me, He was patient because I was cuckoo. You know, He was always quoting scripture, and I wasn't even trying to hear that. I wanted to cuss, and my husband wanted to pray. I wanted to fight, and he wanted to lay hands on me. I wanted to throw things and show that I had a lot of hurt and rage in me. Exactly. And he would say, I am not your enemy. But you became my enemy, but you're not my enemy. You know? And so once I realized who I was and who I am, and once he started tearing down walls, because you got to give it away. You have to give it away. You have to feel safe, right? And you have to say, okay, I can lay this down. But then they do something, you lift it back up, right? But it ain't bad as you get knocked through the wall. So you lay it down, right? So what I had to do is that I had to die to self in order to allow the Lord to pour in, because it didn't matter my husband, who he was and what he did and what he didn't do and how he poured into me and how he loved me. I had to know who I was. And I had to know that without him or with him, I'm going to be great anyway. So he poured into me. And as he continued to pour, I start to pour out. As he began to start to pour in more, I start to pour out. Because I was determined, Tiki. I was determined to be the best version of me that someone tried to take away from me, right? So I praise God for him. I really, really do. I love that little skinny man.
All right, Ms. Sophie, we just have a few more minutes. So if you can just let me know how you felt with it being your father and everything.
Sure. So my perspective on that is just a little bit different. Theirs dealt with their spouses, and mine dealt with my dad. So it had everything to do what kind of qualities did I want for my daughter's dad to be. And I wanted to make sure that my daughter had a loving, caring father figure in her life that I did not have. And that's what I was searching for her, and I found that in her father. And I'm ever so grateful because he loves every ounce of her, as wild as she is, you know, and I wish I had that. You know, I yearned for that, and now I get to see that through my daughter. And I'm ever so grateful that God brought him into my life and to be there for my daughter in every moment that she would ever could possibly need. So it's almost touches on the same thing, like what kind of qualities, but for me it was what kind of father figure did I want to have for my children.
Gotcha. Okay, before we do our takeaways, I just want to talk about steps to heal. 1, acknowledge the issue. 2, seek support. 3, practice self-care. Number 4, identify those triggers, because I know I still have them. Develop coping skills. Practice self-compassion. Give yourself grace. Set boundaries. Process emotions. I probably went through about 7 or 8 different emotions after my abuse. I mean, anger, sadness, all types of emotions that I went through. So process those emotions. It's okay to go through them. Forgive, but don't forget. Focus on the present, and then focus on your healing journey. So in the United States, you may receive anonymous confidential help at any hour through the National Domestic Violence Hotline. It's 800-799-7233 or 800-787-3224. So there's always numbers that you can call. And as Ms. Sophie has shared with us, and also Ms. Stephanie, there are a lot of resources out there for domestic violence victims. So don't be afraid. You do have help out here. Ladies, gentlemen, there are resources. So educate yourself on those resources so you can get out and always have a plan. So I want to go through each ladies right now, and if you can give a takeaway of what you got from the show, or if you have any advice that you'd like to give our audience.
I would just like to say, recap everything that you heard tonight. Pray, take it in consideration. Just know that there is help. So that's what I got out of there is we got resources. We have different stories, but we share a commonality that we're all coming out of something. We're still dealing with something. We're still human is what I got out of this. We're all human. We all have made mistakes. We've all, have overcome something. I'm trying to get emotional. We've all overcome something on different levels. But at the end of the day, what I got out of this is there is hope. There is help. And there's a future for you. So no matter what you do, just don't give up. Don't give up. And don't give in. But when you can, go ahead and get out.
I agree. I think I came out of this, and even this journey, with knowing that she was saying that we're not alone and that you must speak up. And it's okay to speak loud and make certain someone hears you. And if that person doesn't hear you, someone will hear you. Also, too, is that I am so grateful to know about the resources that are starting to be more available, because this was like a silent killer. And that, like they say, what goes on in this house stays in this house. And we had that mentality that if we saw Big Mama or the lady down the street, we knew that her laundry was stayed and in her yard, right? So, and then too, another thing that I can honestly say, a takeaway, and something that I would like to put out there is that abuse doesn't have a face. It doesn't have a gender. It doesn't have a lifestyle. It doesn't have a certain income bracket. There's no face to it. It looks like me, it looks like you, it looks like Monica, and it looks like those out here in the audience and those of you that are online. If you are going through something, or even you think that it's not abuse, check it out. My organization, thank you, is, again, it is Broken Vessels International Ministries, Inc. It's founded here in Houston. We have a home here in Houston as well in Temple and Killeen. It is for domestic abuse and sex trafficking, as well as young teenage girls that are on the street, that are pregnant, that needs to get off the streets. You can, I was gonna put my number out there, but I'm not gonna do that. But if you need to reach you, we do have a website, thank you. It's called Broken Vessels. It's called brokenvessels.com.
Takeaways, ladies?
I have a few takeaways. First of all, I want to thank each one of you for your stories and being so brave to share that, because those are very hurtful things, and I know it's triggering to talk about those stories, because one thing that we always try to do is get that victim to tell that story the least amount of times, because each time she tells that story, she relives that story, or he relives that story. But I really, really appreciate that. I've heard some stories like yours. I've heard worse stories. I've I mean, it's been a gamut of stories, but I really appreciate it. It takes a lot to be that vulnerable and to be that transparent, and I appreciate you. You all don't know that you telling your story, you've saved somebody's life, because we don't know who's listening. Somebody out there is struggling with this. You have no idea, and you don't know who's watching you outside of this. So somebody's watching you, and somebody needed to hear that. We have resources, and our website is empoweredsurvivor.org. But also, there are also some resources. If you go out to eat, go to the doctor, I've noticed, even at my doctor in the restroom, and I mentioned it to my doctor, that's the only place you can go where that abuser cannot go with you, in the restroom. In the restrooms now, in restaurants, doctor's offices, wherever you go and there's a public restroom, a lot of times they're putting the sign up with a QR code or an 800 number. So if you see it, you can take a picture of that QR code, and he or she has no idea what that is.
Okay.
So that's a way to get you some help. So if you're dealing with it, please do something to get you some help. I understand it's hard, but you got to make that step.
Ms. Sophie?
I just wanted to say thank you for asking me to be part of this panel. I'm very, very, very grateful for it, because it opens my eyes to see that there are different entities that are wanting to join together to help victims and families involved in domestic violence. And my biggest takeaway is seeing how equal we are. And as Elizabeth said, there's no discrimination when it comes to domestic violence. And I also want to touch base on, as what you said about information being available in public bathrooms for victims to be able to reach out. The Fort Bend County Sheriff's Office, you can text to 911. If you're too afraid to make that phone call, you can text 911, and you can be able to reach out that way. And there's also the Fort Bend County Women's Shelter, and I can give you their phone number really quick. It's 281-342-HELP. And again, that's 281-342-HELP. Or 4357, and their website is fbwc.org. And you can reach out to them as well. And also, if you do file a report with us for domestic violence, we will get you in contact with our victim liaison to help you start the process to get the resources, including temporary housings in some cases.
Thank you for that, ladies. So once again, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 800-799-7233 or 800-787-3224. Additional resources can be found by calling the National Center for Victims of Crime, 855-484-2846. And of course, like the professional said, you can always dial 911 if you're in any type of dangerous situation. I just want to thank all of you ladies for taking out the time to be present here, to talk about domestic violence, to basically tell your stories, to be brave enough. I respect all of you ladies, and thank you for your expertise and letting us know that there are resources out there that can help victims. I just appreciate all of you guys. Thank you so much, I do. I appreciate my sisters of Christ right here. I love you guys. Thank you so much. Once again, this is the Perfect Blend Radio Show. We are featured on High Volume Music Radio the first and third Wednesday from 7 to 9 p.m. Like he says, if it ain't high volume, it ain't loud enough. So once again, I want to thank you all for watching. Thank you for joining us. And I do hope that you guys gain some nuggets from this show. I do appreciate all of you watching. And once again, I thank you ladies for your time. And thank you, audience, for showing up for us. All right, everyone, you have a great night, and thank you.